Welcome back to Coffee with Krav. Great to see everybody back. I just want to mention a new feature that we have for those of you that are watching this live. I know a lot of you watch this live and a lot of you watch this later on the recordings. But for those of you watching live, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you can see Q&A. And what that means is you can now live ask questions to whoever our guest is. So today, if you have any questions for Matt, you can just hit that button, that Q&A button, type in that question, and we'll hopefully we'll get to those questions. I am very, very excited about today's guest. This is a man that has entertained in Las Vegas at the Superdome. So let me read his bio. I think you're all going to love Matt, and you're going to love today's guest. So Matt Dimaio, the EnterTrainer. He's a speaker, a trainer, an author, a YouTuber. Matt Dimaio is now in his 5th decade of producing attention, getting results from a worldwide audience. Presented with YouTube's Silver Play Button Award for his widely popular channel, Be Smarter Faster. Matt teaches you how to learn everything and anything faster and easier than you've ever dreamed possible. His training ideas and videos have gained millions of viewers and has received tens of thousands of exuberant testimonials from his fans around the planet. He's the author of 3 books on Amazon: How to Remember People's Names, Forgetful No More, and his latest, Straight A's, Strategies for Successful Online Learning. Students and business people of every description can testify that their bottom line results have been positively transformed by applying the powerful mental power tools he teaches. Often called the EnterTrainer for his dynamic and humorous approach, Matt's philosophy is to laugh and learn your way to success. He has spoken on stage at some of North America's most prestigious venues, including Caesar's Palace, Bally's, the Paris Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, Avery Fisher Hall at Lincoln Center, the Toronto Convention Center, New York's Waldorf Astoria, Nassau Coliseum, and even the Super Bowl. I give you the one, the only, Matt Dimaio. Okay, so Matt, welcome here.
Thanks,
So
Mark.
glad for you to join us here. Matt, where'd you grow up?
I'm originally from Nutley, New Jersey, which is North Jersey, about 12 miles from Midtown Manhattan, not far from where the Giants play football.
Okay. Are you a Giant fan?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. We won't
These
get.
days I live in Tampa, Florida, so I'm a Buccaneers fan.
Yeah. Well, hello. You got Tom Brady and then the Super Bowl champ. So
In
I
fact,
don't.
Tom lives in the same neighborhood. I live in a little place called Davis Islands here in Tampa. And Tom is actually renting Derek Jeter's former mansion about a mile from here.
Really interesting. Wow. Okay. Well, say hello to Tom. Say hello to Derek and the boys. So I know in your background you lived in Trinidad for a while. How was that experience?
Well, my wife is originally from Trinidad. We met and married in New Jersey 25 years ago, but she grew up in Trinidad, emigrated to the United States, and became a citizen. She came here when she was about 20 years old. And then later in life, after we were married a few years, her father got very ill. And so she had gone back to ease his passing, and then he didn't die. And so I said, I decided to become an island man and not Staten Island. And so I sold all my stuff, put everything else into mothballs, and decided I was going to go live in the Caribbean for a few years. And while we were there, my daughter was born. And when I lived in Trinidad, I completely reinvented myself. I became a well-known musician and even performed for the prime minister of the country twice.
Wow. Wow. That's fantastic. What type of music do you play?
Well, I'm mostly a rock organist. Think old Deep Purple or old Santana. And but when I lived on the island of Trinidad, I played styles of music that we really don't even have here in the United States, stuff you don't hear about, like soca. And so I was able to adapt. Um, and I wound up first starting in a band, and then eventually I worked in a duo where I play keyboards. So I had multiple keyboards. I was the band, kind of a one-man band, and my partner, who was very well known, played guitar and sang. And so we went out as a duo, but we had a big band sound, and we played all the tourist stuff.
That's very cool. Very, very cool. Well, I guess you came back from Trinidad. You had a daughter. I mean, just going to the memory part. When did you realize that you had an excellent memory?
You know, it didn't quite happen that I realized I had an excellent memory. I actually had to build it. I had to develop it. Oh, we're going to drink our coffee now? Okay, perfect.
Cheers.
Cheers. A salud.
A salud.
So I'm going to take you back to the year 1979.
Okay.
Union, New Jersey. I was running a small chain of computer programming schools. Now, in 1979, the world was operating on manila punch cards. For those that are
Yes, I
of the
do remember
younger
that.
set out there, these
I remember
were
that.
little cards that came in your envelope that told the power company or the gas company, you had to send this stuff back with your bill because it's the only way the computer knew who you were. And it would be 2 years before IBM would release its first PC. That happened in August of 81. I'm talking about July of 79.
Okay.
um, and so this was an area where people were talking about computers. Nobody had one in their home. And I had a lot of young people that were looking to be retrained for a career. The U.S. economy was in shambles. Carter was in the White House. We had gas lines around the block, and the, um, the economy was. People were looking for new types of careers that they could be trained in. So the majority of my students were not high school kids that were coming there instead of college. These were young adults that had been in the work world that were looking to get retrained for a hot new career. And the buzz was about this computer stuff. And they discovered that they were terrible students. It had been a couple of years since they were in school. And here's what happened. My income was being affected when these students dropped out. I was the head of admissions. And if they didn't finish the course, they came back and did a chargeback because I got paid based on collected tuitions. In the financial services business, you know about chargebacks. And so I began to research what makes somebody a good student. I couldn't use myself as an example. I dropped out of college after 2 years. I wanted to be a rock and roller. And so I began to study what makes somebody a good student. And I bought every book, every audio cassette program, attended every seminar, and I began to teach the little things that I learned to my students at the school in a 90-minute seminar I created called What School Never Taught You About Learning. And I would talk about note taking and memory and how to pay attention and how to focus and concentrate and how to take exams. And amazing things happened. Not only did I reduce my dropout rate, but much more importantly, I dramatically increased the job placement rate because when these young people went on the interview, they actually knew what they were talking about. Go figure. And that's when the magic happened. I
That's
began to
very
get calls from the companies that hired these graduates of mine, wondering what in the world we were doing at our school that made these people perform so much better than students that they had hired from competing schools. So I began to get calls from professional organizations to do after dinner speaking engagements. And that is when I developed an after dinner show. I would do demonstrations of memory power. I would hand out 20 copies of the same Time or Newsweek magazine. Back then, they were more than 100 pages. I mean, today they're like a pamphlet. But I would have people say, all right, what's on page 62? What's on page 54? I would memorize lists of items that the audience would call off to me. I would memorize a deck of playing
So,
cards.
so let me ask you a question on that. My wife has an amazing memory. She remembers everything that I've done wrong since we met back in the '80s, and absolutely brings it up when
Funny how
when
they
she
do
need
that.
when she needs to. So my memory is not as good. It seems that memory's innate. It seems like there's just people that have great memories. Can a good memory be taught?
And that's absolutely the key. Learning to do these types of powerful public demonstrations it was a mechanical skill. Like I would go in and remember the names of everybody in the room, and it doesn't matter. Um, for me, a small crowd is 30 to 50 people. I've gone into seminar rooms where I've remembered the names, first, last name, women's maiden names, the names of their pets for 400 people. It's a mechanical skill. It's like riding a bicycle. Nobody's born knowing how to do it.
Hmm.
Once you learn it though, it's a system. Once you get the hang of it, it just becomes a part of you. That's good
So
news, isn't it?
that's great news. So, but I mean, my wife has all these years ahead of me. I mean, she's got since the '80s, the '90s. I won't be able to
That's a
catch up.
different kind of memory.
So, ha- had how'd you get started with the high performance learning stuff? So that I looked at your bio and there's this high performance learning stuff. So
so
talk a little bit about that.
so here's the deal. While I was at the computer schools, the
Yeah.
kids nicknamed me Matt the Memory Man, and I hated that. It sounds catchy at the beginning. When I would do demonstrations at these professional organizations, they would introduce me that way. I painted myself into a corner. People expected me to always remember everything all the time.
Mm.
They couldn't separate the show from the person. And so and I realized that memory is actually only a small part of the learning process. The stuff that I was teaching at the computer schools, the majority of it had nothing to do with memory. That's the last part. It was all about how do you get the information into your head in the first place. Every all your life, people have told you, your parents, your teachers wag their finger at you and they'll tell you, pay attention, listen to me. Almost nobody has ever taken a class in how to pay attention, as if there are no techniques. Or every sales trainer in the world tells you stuff like, well, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. You got to listen twice as much as you talk. Well, what the heck does that even mean? Almost nobody has actually taken a class in how to be an excellent listener, as if there's nothing to learn there. Well, so I began to break apart the process of how do you absorb and then retain and then recall information. And so I put it into a label, high performance learning. And that's hard to understand for a lot of people. So I explain it. It's how to learn everything and anything faster and easier and remember it. And so people want to learn things faster and easier. Look, we live in a world of information overload.
Mhm.
Those who don't keep up run the risk of being left behind. We've got information coming at us faster than ever before. It's like a fire hose blasting at us. And school never really taught us how to learn. They told us what to learn,
Right.
but they never told us how to learn it. And
So
so I
are you,
decided
I
to
mean, this is very exciting stuff, at least for me, I'm sure for everyone. So are you going to show us how to do this?
absolutely. I've got a really cool surprise for you, as a matter of fact,
You
for you
do.
and
Uh-oh.
all your viewers and listeners, where I'm actually going to have the people in your audience do something that they believe is flat out impossible. So it doesn't matter. look, let's get clear on this. It doesn't matter if I have a great memory. It doesn't matter that I can remember all this stuff and do these fancy demonstrations, because people look at me like I'm a Martian, like, well, you can do it, but I can't. It's easier than you think. But before I get into the demonstration, with your permission, can I talk about what the problem is? Because I can help your audience triple their memory power without any fancy techniques.
Matt, why don't you tell us what the problem is?
That's a great idea.
Glad I thought of that.
So I talk about something called the 3 causes of forgettery. You know, everybody wants to talk about memory, but if you understand what causes you to have a bad memory or causes you to be forgetful in the first place, understanding the problem is more than half of the solution. So there's 3 causes of forgettery. The first cause is that you don't get it to begin with. For example, people often talk about how bad they are remembering people's names. Well, why are they bad at remembering names? Well, the first part of the problem is if you don't get the name, there's no way to keep it. So you're at a party, you're at a cocktail hour, you're meeting new people, and somebody says, "Hey, I'd like you to meet my friend, Mr. Blah, blah, blah." And you go, "Yeah, nice to see you. How you doing, buddy?" And you don't get the name. If you don't get it, you can't keep it. To forget is to not get. The second part of the problem is that you don't care. Now, people may say, "Oh, come on, Matt, I care." Yeah, well, you care enough, but you don't care enough to do something about it. So I'm going to give you some techniques and some easy ideas, but you have to actually care. Like you were talking about earlier, Mark, about how your wife will come back to you with stuff that she remembers from years ago. Well, it's kind of, everybody's heard of the idea of selective memory. Mom or the teacher would wag their finger. You can only remember what you want to remember. Right. It's like the guy who can recall all of the statistics of their favorite quarterbacks in all of the NFL, but can't remember their wedding anniversary. It's not that they have a bad memory. You have to care. So you got to get it. And you have to care whether or not you actually do remember. But the third cause of forgettery is the big one. And this is what we're going to talk about in my demonstration that I'm going to prove to you. And the third cause of forgettery is that you don't believe. What you don't believe is that you have a superhuman, super powerful memory right now. If you actually stop to try and think about how much stuff you do remember, it's staggering. It's astonishing that you can keep that much stuff in your head. You don't even know how you do it. But people say things to themselves like, "Oh, I must be getting the Alzheimer's." Meantime, they're in their 40s. Or they'll say things like, "Oh, I can always remember a face, but I can never remember a name." Or "I have a terrible memory." Well, saying that stuff is not the result of a bad memory. That, in large part, is the cause. And before I move on to the demonstration, I want to give you I don't want you or any of the members of your audience to gloss over how important these 3 causes of forgettery are. You see, here in Tampa, I belong to a bunch of different organizations, and one of them has been the Tampa Bay Business Owners, at which there's a man who's a very well-known photographer. His first name is Rick. And Rick has seen me do demonstrations and see me do public presentations and stuff. And he just kind of, took a fascination with it all. And Rick is a world-class photographer, and he gets invited to do a lot of luxury events. Well, I hadn't seen him in a while. He came up to me at a meeting and he said, Matt, I got to tell you, I was doing this wedding out of state for some really wealthy people. And I remembered everybody's name at the whole wedding reception. And they were amazed. I got the biggest tip afterwards. Everybody was referring me. And I said, Rick, I'll bet you didn't even have to use any fancy techniques to remember the people's names. You just made sure you got it, cared, and believed, right? You used the three causes of forgettery. That's right. How did you know? You can
Amazing.
literally triple your ability if you just get it, take the time to get it, care whether or not you remember it, and then say the right instructions to yourself. Believe that you have the ability. Stop talking yourself down. And with that, I want to prove the point. So with
Okay.
that, can I do that demonstration now?
Absolutely. I'm very excited.
All right. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
And let's see. I'm going to come over here and share this. And I'm going to expand it out. And you tell me, you see that clearly, right? It says how to do
Perfect.
the impossible.
Perfect.
All
Yep.
right.
You got it.
So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play a game with you and with everybody in the audience.
Okay.
And we're going to do something that you believe is flat out impossible. Now, let me define impossible. There's two kinds of impossible. There's what I call the possible impossible, and then there's the impossible impossible. Now, I'm not just playing games with words. You see, they're both possible. Let me explain what I mean by this. The first kind, the possible impossible, is where people say, I couldn't possibly remember a whole room full of people's names. I couldn't possibly lose weight or quit smoking or whatever it happens to be. Well, meanwhile, millions of people all over the world are doing it. It's only impossible because you say it's impossible.
Hmm.
The next one is tougher. And that's the impossible impossible. Impossible impossible is stuff that nobody's ever done before. But we live in a world where the impossible impossible is happening around us every day. Look, a year, 2 years ago, people talked about self-driving cars. Impossible. Now, Tampa is one of the test markets for them. And in Colorado, I understand they got a fleet of them on the road. Everybody, a lot of people have in their homes these disembodied voices that do your bidding, named Alexa. We have these, these devices in our homes, or in our hands where, it takes the place of an encyclopedia, video camera, telephone. I mean, a whole closet full of stuff. Well, a few years ago, that was all impossible. We live in a world where that's happening every day. So I want to now give you the ability to do something that you believe is flat out impossible. Now, when we talk about memory, the hardest thing to remember is a long string of random numbers. The number 7 is about the limit that people can remember. So 7 digits, that's the reason that your phone number is 7 digits.
Okay.
But 7 digits is about the limit. Well, there's a 10-digit number, but I'm not going to stop there. There's another one. And now let's really make it challenging. That's 30 digits.
Whoa.
Now, I am going to have you and everybody in your audience be able to recall a 30-digit number, learn it perfectly from the beginning to the end, from the middle to the two ends, be able to remember it for days and do it effortlessly. And the total amount of time it'll take me to teach you to do this is less than 3 minutes.
What?
So here we go.
Looks
So
like
those of you with
jumbled,
stopwatches,
just looks like jumbled numbers.
So now I'm going to prove a point to you in just a moment. So remember the 3 causes of forgettery. You've got to get it, you've got to care, you got to believe. Well, I know you don't believe, so I'll do the believing for you.
Okay.
But I want
I believe.
you
I
to
believe.
get
I
it.
believe. I believe. I
I
believe.
believe. I
I'm there.
believe.
I'm believe. I'm there. I'm believe.
And so, but I do want everybody to get it, to pay attention, and to care, because there will be a quiz at the end. All right, so here we go.
Oh, okay. I'm listening.
I'm going to tell you a story about Penny and her husband, Buck. So
Penny
there's
and
the
Buck.
first 5 digits, 01100. So Penny and her husband Buck learned this 30-digit number demonstration, and they did it as easy as 123. So Penny and Buck, 30-digit number, 123. There's the first line of that long number.
Okay.
And then they ran out and they told their buddy James Bond 007 that he could do it too. And they also told his 16-year-old daughter, but they didn't believe them. James Bond and the 16-year-old daughter didn't believe them. So they bet them $10,000 that they could remember the 30-digit number too. And they won that bet, but they didn't win the bet today. They won the bet on Christmas Day, 12/25. And they got so excited about winning that $10,000 that they jumped in their car and raced down the road at 100 miles an hour and celebrated with their favorite beverages at 7-Eleven with raspberry Slurpees. All right, so let's review our story. So I'm going to put it up on the screen without the images. All right, so here's the first line.
Buck.
Penny and her husband Buck, 01100. And they had the
30.
ability to remember a 30-digit number as easy as 123. They got so excited, they ran out and told their buddy James Bond 007 and his 16-year-old daughter. They didn't believe him, so they bet them $10,000 that they could do it. And they won the bet on Christmas Day, 12/25. Got so excited, they jumped in the car, raced down the road at 100 miles an hour, and celebrated with raspberry Slurpees at 7-Eleven. All right. 0110030123007 16 10,000 1225 100 7-Eleven. Stop. You have just memorized this entire number. That is an impressive set string of digits. Now, play along at home without writing it down, folks. I want you to answer in your head. I want you to answer out loud. All of those of you that are watching, play along and see how you do. All right, who's the story about? Right,
Penny
Penny
and
and her husband
Buck.
Buck.
100.
And what did
And
they
it's
do?
30.
The
They want to
30-digit
do
number,
30-digit number. It's easy as 123.
123. And who'd
They
they
went
go
out
and
and
tell?
told 007 and his
And,
16-year-old daughter, and
and
they
they bet
bet
them
$10,000 on
10,000,
Christmas 12/25,
12/25,
racing 100 miles an hour
100 miles an hour,
at 7-Eleven.
7-Eleven.
When they
Yay!
celebrated.
You did it. Yay!
Wow, who knew?
Now, here is what you just remembered, and you did it in less than 3 minutes. Now, a few minutes ago, you looked at this number and said, if you're like a normal human being, you looked at this number and you said, I
There's no
don't
way.
care what the guy with the funny mustache tells me. I can't do it. And 3 minutes later, you can all do it. Now, if I'm allowed to read your thoughts, some of you are going, oh, yeah, but you can only do it with those numbers. That was set up. Yes, this number was set up so I could prove a point, but you can do it with any numbers. You simply tell different stories. Here's what we did. I got you to believe in yourself, or at least I believed for you. You need to believe. You need to keep your mind open to new possibilities, and you need to use some strategy. And that's exactly what we did here, is we used some strategy. Now, I'm going to stop sharing so that we can go back to our live feed. And are we good?
That was great. That was great.
Right.
So just as a reminder, you got it, right? The three things. You got it, you got to care, and you got to believe.
Amen.
There was
Amen, Brother Mark.
There was an old Met reliever. I think his name was Tug McGraw. He used to say, "You got to believe." For the Mets, you got to believe when the Mets were
the amazing
well.
Mets.
The amazing Mets many years ago. You got to believe. So you got to believe. All right, that I love that. That's great.
Now
Thank
here's the point that, and I want to bring some additional points out about that long number demonstration,
Mhm.
because it is a metaphor for a lot of things in life. You know, if you're in sales, this is a great example because I train a lot of salespeople, and they look at this month's new goals and what their quotas are and what they're attending to accomplish. And a lot of times people will say, I can't do it. That's just too big. It's too high. Well, I, I want you to think back to the long number demonstration. What did we actually do to accomplish something impossible? What did we do? Well, we did what was called elephant eating. How do you eat an elephant? Same way you eat a chicken, one
One bite.
bite at a time.
Mm.
The technical term for what we did is called chunking. We've made chunks, and your mind will think in terms of those little chunks. When we went through it, you didn't have to worry about, who 007 was. I already set the number up so that the chunks already had a meaning for you. Even my dog is getting excited about it
Yeah.
in the background. I have a big dog.
Okay.
The mailman must be here. My dog is protecting me from the mailman in the background. And so the we broke it down into chunks that you would easily recognize. But when you're doing it yourself, you use your own examples to be able to do that sort of thing. The key is stop telling yourself that you can't do it and start asking this question: how can I? Start asking, how can I remember this person's name? How can I remember what my schedule is?
So specifically for the name part. So you're in this room, 30 people, and you're shaking hands, and now I got it. So I care and I believe, right? So I got it, I care, and I believe, and I shake hand at Dimaio. Is there any other technique? Do I look you in the eye? Do I say that's the guy with the mustache? Or
Right.
is there another memory thing when you're meeting someone for the first time?
I'm going to reveal a really big secret in a really short amount of time.
Okay.
The secret to having a superhuman memory can be summed up in two really basic techniques: imagination and connection. Now, I teach what is called natural learning. Um, the way we were made, our creator built us a certain way. If you use the mechanism the way it was designed, it works better. Go figure.
Makes sense.
And so we are, when we think in pictures. We call it imagination, which is a bigger form of the word image. And where you store those images is not when you see the images, you don't store them in the side of your head, in the top of your head, in the back of your head. When you see those images, you see them on the movie screen on the inside of your forehead. Now, I tell you that. Now, you already know it's true. You know that that's where you see the pictures. Nobody ever really told you about it before. But as soon as I said it, you knew that it was true because that's where you see them.
Mhm.
Once you know where they are, now you can make the pictures there deliberately. Now you know exactly where to look for them. So when you are meeting somebody new and they have a difficult name or they have an unusual name, I'm going to teach you how to make images. But you don't you don't need me to tell you about how to do that. The second part is you're going to make connections. People use the word association. I believe that association is a terrible word because if it was a good word, you'd be able to use it easier. Connection is a really easy word to understand. And the connecting word is like. Those of you that have small children or grandchildren, watch the way they learn stuff. They'll go, Dad, Grandpa, Grandma, you mean it's like, yeah, it's like this is like that. I'm making a connection here. So the goal is to be able to make images and connect them to other stuff. Now, you already do this naturally. It happens instantaneously. For example, both my mom and dad were called Pat, Uncle Pat and Aunt Patty. If I meet somebody named Pat, I don't have to worry about if I'm going to remember their name or not. I go, Pat, like my dad.
Mm.
My brother's name happens to be Mark, Matthew and Mark. All my life, people ask me, where's Luke and John? And um, so when I meet you, I don't have to do anything. I go, oh, Mark, like my brother. I instantly make that connection. Well, I teach you how to do that, even if you don't know other people with the same name. So there's really 4 different ways of making images. I don't know how much time we've got, and I don't really want to be on a soapbox, but this is I teach all of this stuff. As a matter of fact, I just released a whole video course called "How to Have an Incredible Memory." An incredible memory. Um, and so I really get into the nitty gritty on this. And I also have
Mm.
a book on the subject where I really get into the nitty gritty. But what I do is I give you pictures in advance. Like, for example, there's a series of old silly jokes. Um, uh, what do you call a guy stuffed in your mailbox? Bill. Um,
They now call that
what
dad jokes. They now
yeah,
call
Dad.
that dad
What do you
jokes.
call a guy stuffed in a pot on your stove? Stew. What do you call 2 guys hanging around your windows? Kurt and Rod.
I no mas, no mas.
Stupid jokes, but kids do this all of the time. It's the way you think. You make a silly picture, the sillier the better, the more clear it is the better, the more vivid it is the better, and you make a connection. And I teach you how to do it with names, with scientific terms, with vocabulary, with spelling. I, I can teach you how to learn everything and anything faster and easier by doing this connection stuff. And that's how we did the long number. I made pictures out of the numbers, connected it together. You already had connections. You already were able to relate to the chunks that I used. Then I connected it together with a story, and I just did it for you. But once you get used to doing it yourself, like I said earlier, it's like riding a bicycle. Nobody is born knowing how to do it, but you have the innate ability to do it. Once somebody shows you how to do it, you can get better and better at it. And some
So
people,
let me ask you this. So I meet Matt Dimaio. You're saying that I should have an image in my mind and then some kind of connection. So maybe
I,
connection is I know another Matt, you know,
another mat,
I
or
know.
there's other kinds of mats. A welcome mat. I'm always a welcome mat. A wrestling mat. In high school, I was a wrestling mat. I've got a buddy of mine that calls me Matador. And I told him when I was single, Matador is the girls and the girls adore Matt. And so, um, and then you can look at me and go, all right, well, the mustache, that's a distinguishing feature. It's like a welcome mat, and so if I can
those
stop
are
from
those are
bumping into the microphone, that would be good.
so I just want to take just a second just to remind the audience that if you do have a question for Matt, all you have to do is go on the bottom of your screen, right? And there's a Q&A. You just have to hit that button, Q&A, and then you type in a question. I have a few more questions, but just want to give the audience the opportunity that if they do have a question to ask that question. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because speaking of YouTube, I know that you're on YouTube. I was watching one of your YouTube videos, and you had a room full of people, but they were all from India, and it wasn't just Matt or Mark or Pat. It was these very, very long names, and you nailed it. I mean, it was extraordinary. You got everybody's name. So I guess this technique works with difficult difficult material as well.
Absolutely. And the technique for remembering difficult sounding names is the same technique for remembering new vocabulary, whether it's English language vocabulary or scientific vocabulary or foreign language vocabulary. And what I do is I teach you how to um, make the sound of that name or the sound of that new word how you break it apart and you hear yourself. What does it sound like? And you make images out of it. To try and explain it this way is a little more complicated, but when I start to give you examples of it, it becomes, a whole lot easier because you see it happen right in front of you. And you see, the cool part about this is it's really not learning something new for you. You already do this now. But the thing is, you do it haphazardly. You
Mm,
don't even know how you remember stuff. Look, in your profession, think about the extraordinarily difficult exams that you had to pass.
mm,
The Series 7 is up there with getting into medical school or passing the LSAT. To be able to pass the Series 7 exam is on par with some of the most difficult tests that there are. And yet here you are, and everybody on your team that's got that certification has done it. And you had to learn vocabulary, definitions of rules, and a lot of times the way you did it is invisible to you. You don't know how you did it, you just did it. But you use these techniques. What I do is I simply make you aware that this is what's happening. I'll give you a quick example of what I mean. You're driving to a brand new person's house. You've met a new friend and you're going to their house for the very first time. Every landmark along that route is important to you. You got to remember the house with the funny color and the corner where they've got that bent fence and the place with the weird tree. After you've been to that person's house 5, 8, 10 times, you no longer even see those landmarks.
mm.
You know where you're going, but your mind sees them. But the process happens so instantaneously quick that you're no longer aware of it. It's happening at blinding speed. It's happening at the speed of thought. That's what I teach you how to do. That's what you're doing now. I just make the process more mechanical so you can do it deliberately instead of haphazardly.
That's great. Well, I got one more question for you. Just, I know that I mentioned before that you played at Caesar's Palace and Avery Fisher Hall and Nassau Coliseum and Superdome. What were you doing there? What type of
Basically, I was
entertainment?
teaching very large audiences of salespeople. The biggest crowd that I've ever spoken for was at the Baltimore Convention Center, where my audience was over 10,000 people.
Wow.
And I was not the only speaker on the bill. I was always part of part of a group. Like when I spoke on stage at the Superdome, it was for a company's big convention. The
Mm.
headlining speaker for that was Anthony Robbins.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
Now, when I was at the Baltimore Convention Center for my audience of 10,000, I was the headliner. Um, and Typically, I was teaching selling related stuff.
Mm,
And that um, the reason that I do that is the process of learning and teaching is very much the selling process. If you think about it, first, when you hire the salesperson, they've got to learn all the product knowledge and they've got to learn it well enough that they can now explain it or teach it to their prospect. And the prospect has to learn it or absorb it or understand it well enough that they're willing to cut loose a check. So the process of transference of information,
mm.
that transfer of information is learning and teaching and learning and teaching and learning and teaching. Well, what I do translates beautifully to salespeople. So when I'm not working with high school or college students, which is the majority of my audience on my YouTube channel, the majority of the audience on my channel, Be Smarter, Faster, is 18 to 24-year-old students, literally from all over the world. Listen to this. This is really cool. I just turned 69 in March. And so I've just started my 70th year. So those people that are talking about, age being a factor, yes, age will be a factor if you're taking, strong medications that are, interfering with your mental process. That'll definitely be a factor. But as long as you keep yourself active, you can stall off, a lot of the mental problems. My own mother died from the Alzheimer's. So I'm like
Mm,
really self-conscious about, I'm really aware of that.
sure.
So keep yourself physically active and you'll stall that stuff off. But I have students from all over the world who write to me, people that I'll never meet in countries that I'll never visit in the far corners of the world. I've got people sending me testimonials for what they're able to accomplish now, who have names that cannot be spelled with our alphabet.
Wow. Wow. Well, listen, Matt, everything that you taught us was very, very impressive. You said it all here. I really appreciate the time that you've taken and helped and entertained us here today. For everybody out there, I just want to remind everybody, Coffee with Krav is every Tuesday, the first Tuesday of the month at 10 o'clock. Next one will be May 4th. We have Norma Yeager. It's a great story about a woman that broke down the barriers in an all-male industry, Wall Street. She was the first woman ever to go onto the New York Stock Exchange. So it's gonna be far-reaching. It's gonna be wonderful. You're really gonna love it, and I look forward to seeing everybody there. And Matt, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Same bat channel, same bat time. Take care, everybody. Enjoy. Thank you.